Little Big Man tells the story of Jack Crab, a white man who grew up in a community of Native Americans called the Human Beings. These human beings took him in after his family was murdered by another community of Native Americans. Though this film would be considered a Western, which is obvious through its aesthetic and content, Arthur Penn directs Little Big Man to be a satirical Western, calling to light the mistreatment of Native Americans and the hypocrisy of white culture. Though the story takes place much earlier in American history, the film's cultural relevance is strong in the 70s when Little Big Man was put forth. The 70s were a tricky time in America as the nation dealt with military involvement in Vietnam. Just as many Americans felt outraged and uncomfortable with the fight in Vietnam, the bewilderment Jack Crab exhibits throughout the film as he encounters one atrocity after another is met by his inability to do anything about it. He's powerless in a world filled with forces that undermine him. Jack Crab's experience is a stand-in for the American moral experience of the day, as I said in Avi Weinrib's analysis of the film. Crab experienced tragedy after tragedy as he tried to figure out who he was throughout his life. And many Americans feel similar to Crab, that America has just been tragedy after tragedy, thus relating to the story in a potentially unanticipated way. Arthur Penn, the director, explained in a video interview done with the Television Academy Foundation that this was a film that took him over 6 years to get approved. Even though Penn was a well-respected director, fresh off the classic Bonnie and Clyde, which will be discussed later, he should have been able to make any movie he wanted. But because of a basic Hollywood prejudice, as he puts it, he was met with a lot of resistance to the film. Hollywood had a deeply negative feeling toward Native Americans in film, and that feeling being that the Native Americans could not be treated with sympathy or portrayed as anything other than the evil savaging the American people. Penn completely flipped this idea on its head throughout the film, and perhaps the most obvious attack on that idea was the naming of the tribe that raises Crab. The Human Beings, Old Lodgeskins, Crab's adoptive grandfather, paints the picture of the human beings versus the white people, when he reflects on the white people's attack of his family and tribe. The audience doesn't expect this. As stated in the textbook, Looking at Movies, classic westerns are a form of modern mythology that offers narrative representations of Americans as rugged, self-sufficient individuals taming a savage wilderness with common sense and direct action. Little Big Man pokes at this expectation and makes it so that Crab fails every time he tries to be self-sufficient, but also makes the white people, specifically the military, such as Custard, to be seen as a savage people. Those with common sense and direct action aren't who is normally portrayed with such characteristics in westerns. The human beings are those with the respectable qualities. Penn also had another controversial film that messes with the bounds of genre in his film Bonnie and Clyde. Classic Movie Recall explains how some critics had initially tacked the movie for glorifying murderers. The two lead characters, played by Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, are morally ambiguous, and the violence is bloody and shocking, especially during the legendary climax. The article also explains how it changed the game for New Hollywood, as it portrayed sex and violence in a much more open manner. Not only was Little Big Man also almost explicitly graphic in its violent scenes, the matter of sex was also more widely explored compared to more conservative, no-nonsense westerns. With genre limitations come the innate need for directors and filmmakers to break the norm and change the game. Some of the best films of our time and in history have come from filmmakers analyzing the current culture and using film to send a message.